This is Kirtop, and here are 100 artifacts buried underground for millions of years. A boulder from the Ice Age. Brandon Dudas, a 31-year-old teacher from Indianapolis, tried to remove a stone that was getting in the way of mowing the lawn. As he dug, he discovered the stone seemed endless. He carried the soil out in buckets and filmed the process on TikTok. The video went viral and got over 9 million views. The advice to call a crane turned out to be useful. Only with a lift did it become clear that this was a boulder weighing over 10.3 tons. According to Dudas himself, its age could be 10 to 15,000 years. It dates back to the last ice age. He left the boulder and made it the centerpiece of his yard. He surrounded it with smaller stones, added mulch and soil, and planted local plants. He says he wants to install lighting. Thus, the giant boulder from the Ice Age became a local landmark. In an interview with People, he admitted that working with the boulder forced him to renovate the entire property. And according to the neighbors, this inspired others to work on their own yards. From a geological point of view, it's simple. The glacier once brought the stone, and over many years, the soil gradually covered it. From a human perspective, this is a rare case when a problem becomes a reason to tidy up and leave a mark. A metal rod. How can we explain this mysterious artifact? Inside a Mazan stone found in the Chinese mountains, collector Jiling Wang discovered a metal rod with threads resembling a screw. But what's most strange is that solid rock formed around it, which suggests that the find could be millions of years old. Some have suggested that this is a meteorite with an alien artifact inside. Others believe that this is an ancient man-made object that, for unknown reasons, ended up in the ground and turned into a fossil. Skeptics, on the other hand, believe that this is simply a rare natural formation, and the screw is just a fossilized marine organism. Interestingly, similar discoveries have been found worldwide. Is this coincidence or proof of an ancient unknown technology? For now, this artifact remains one of the most mysterious archaeological enigmas. Coffins for the gods? Under the sands of the Egyptian desert, not far from the Pyramid of Djoser, there is an underground place called the Serapeum. The French archaeologist Auguste Mariette discovered it back in 1850, and at one time an entire avenue of sphinxes led to it. Narrow corridors descend into the darkness, and there in hollowed-out chambers stand stone boxes. But these are not ordinary coffins. Each sarcophagus weighs dozens of tons. One such box weighs as much as a fully loaded railroad car, and some are even heavier. They are carved from solid pieces of granite and basalt. The interiors are polished so smoothly that even a modern engineer would be amazed. And the thick lid fits the box with a precision that's hard to achieve even today. And they didn't bury pharaohs in them. Bulls were laid to rest in these coffins. In ancient Memphis, priests selected one bull, declaring it the living form of a god. While the bull lived, it was honored as sacred, and when it died, its body was mummified and placed in these giant sarcophagi with honors that not every person received. And so it went on, century after century, from the time of Pharaoh Amenhotep III and almost up to the Roman era. Now think about this. To carve such a box from solid granite, polish it from the inside, haul dozens of tons of stone through narrow underground corridors, and lower it precisely into place, you need a quarry, transportation, engineering calculations, and hundreds of people. And all this was done for a bull. Some researchers still claim there was lost technology, saying it was done by hand, but that's just not possible. Egyptologists simplify everything as much as possible and claim there's no magic involved, only abrasives, levers, copper tools, and years of painstaking work. Maybe that's true, but just imagine it yourself. You need to carve a box and a lid weighing dozens of tons out of solid rock, then polish the inner surface to a mirror finish, lower it all underground through a corridor barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through, and set the lid so that there's no gap at all. No crane, no angle grinder, no laser level. When you stand next to such a 40-ton box that someone dragged in here more than 2,000 years ago for the sake of a sacred bull, the theory about primitive levers doesn't sound very convincing. And there's another odd thing. Many of the sarcophagi were found empty. There were no bulls inside. Either they were looted in ancient times, or maybe they weren't meant for that in the first place. Scientists and historians are still debating this. Currently, 9 buried bulls are known, and according to Marriott himself, 3 more have not been found to this day. The scariest thing is that thousands of years ago, this was a civilization far more advanced than ours today, and yet it was destroyed. What really happened back then, we may never know. The Doomsday Glacier, the Thwaites Glacier, is located in West Antarctica. Its area is comparable to that of Great Britain, and it holds a massive amount of ice directly connected to global sea levels. It is called the Doomsday Glacier because of the role it plays in the stability of the entire West Antarctic region. For a long time, it was believed that the main threat was related to melting from below. Warm ocean currents erode the glacier where it meets the seafloor, gradually weakening its grip. But satellite data from recent years has shown another process developing in parallel. Long cracks have begun to form inside the glacier. We're not talking about surface fractures, but about a system of internal ruptures stretching for tens of kilometers. Their total length has more than doubled in a short period of time. These cracks spread in zones of maximum stress, where the ice loses its structural integrity. The destruction is happening not at the edge, but from within the mass. This changes the behavior of the glacier. Instead of slowly sliding down, it starts to lose stability piece by piece. The shelf part, which used to serve as support and held back the movement of ice into the ocean, is gradually weakening. The volume of ice associated with Thwaites is equivalent to a rise in global sea level of about 65 centimeters, but its significance goes beyond just one number. It serves the neighboring ice basins. If it loses stability, they will also start moving, increasing the total contribution to several meters. Satellite observation records the acceleration of ice flow and changes in its geometry. Models show that the process could enter an irreversible phase within a few decades. The exact timing is unknown, but the dynamics themselves have already been recorded and confirmed by independent measurements. Strange scratches on the stones. The Swedish island of Gotland is located in the Baltic Sea, and if you move away from the tourist spots and look carefully under your feet, you start to notice something strange. There are deep scratches on the stones, long, straight, clearly made by someone's hand. And not just one or two, but thousands of such marks all over the island, on boulders, on cliffs, on separate stone blocks. Moreover, in some places there are literally dozens of them on a single stone, while nearby there isn't a single one. When people started talking seriously about this in the 19th century, the first thing that came to mind was that weapons were sharpened here. The Baltic Islands were a center for trading swords and axes, and the sharpening marks on the stone seemed like a logical explanation. But it quickly turned out that the size and shape of these scratches just weren't suitable for sharpening. Not a single sword or axe from that era would even fit into these narrow grooves. And the strangest thing is, no debris from work was ever found near these stones. No metal shavings, no broken blade fragments. Nothing at all that would suggest anything was ever sharpened here. And then something interesting was discovered. The same kind of grooves can be found in Norway, Finland, and France. There, they're called polissoir and are dated to the Neolithic period, the same culture that built dolmens and erected menhirs. Similar marks have been found in Australia and India. All over the world, similar traces are found in stone, and that alone is already strange. Identical scratches made by people who couldn't have known about each other. Nowhere else in the world are as many found as on Gotland. Scientists have counted more than 3,600 such marks there. Some are right on the cliffs, others are on separate stones scattered all over the island. Scientists have suggested several theories. The first one is astronomical. Many of the grooves are oriented toward the sun or the moon. It's possible this was a way to track time and seasons. The second theory is ritualistic. The symbolic marks are connected to fertility or death cults. And finally, the practical theory, polishing wooden poles or bone tools, the traces of which simply haven't survived. None of the theories explain why people on different continents, who couldn't possibly have known about each other, created the same shapes. Why are there dozens of grooves in some places but none nearby? And why go to all that trouble with hard limestone in the first place? There are 3,600 grooves on one island, and there's still no answer. What do you think it is? Write your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious to hear your theories. Sarmanskoye gold. Undisturbed burial mounds are every archaeologist's dream, but most often, during excavations, scientists only manage to find shards, household items, and tools, all the things that were of no use to ancient looters. Exceptions are rare and always sensational. The ancient Filipovsky burial mounds in the Orenburg region were excavated in 1988. They contained dozens of ornaments of the Sarmatians, a warlike nomadic and Iranian-speaking people. The discovered treasures were made more than 2,000 years ago, around the 4th century BC. In the burial mound, which was presumably built over the grave of a king, harnesses, daggers, and dishes with gold and silver inlays were preserved, made by Persian craftsmen in the 6th to 4th centuries BC, jugs and amphorae with zoomorphic handles, golden statuettes of Argali, and finally, 26 large figures of deer with twisted antlers, a total of several hundred items. Tyrannosaurus's grandfather on the shelf, 74 million years old. In a museum storage in New Mexico, a nearly 1 meter long bone had been gathering dust for 7 years, a tibia, heavy, with a distinctive curve that any paleontologist would recognize at first glance. It was lying in a box with an inventory number among hundreds of others, and no one really paid much attention to it because in places like that there are thousands of bones. And at some point, it all just becomes background. Paleontologist Nicholas Longrich from the University of Bath picked it up and something didn't add up. The rock from which the bone was extracted was dated to 74 million years old, while the classic Tyrannosaurus rex lived 66 million years ago. That's an 8 million year difference. It's kind of like finding a smartphone in a geological layer where there should only be button phones. Everything looks familiar, but something is fundamentally off. When Longrich calculated, the numbers became even more interesting. The bone is only 16% shorter than the corresponding bone of Wuxu, the largest known Tyrannosaurus skeleton, and recalculating the proportions gave a weight of 4.7 tons, meaning this animal was 50% heavier than any of its contemporaries. To grasp the scale, take an ordinary Tyrannosaurus from a textbook and mentally add half of its own weight on top of it. That's what stood in the southwest of North America 8 million years before the T-Rex even appeared on the scene. Longrich says it directly. This is an exact copy of the Tyrannosaurus. If this bone had been found in the same layers as the classic T-Rex, no one would have doubted its identity. But it was found earlier, and this overturns one of the most persistent beliefs in dinosaur science. Until now, it was believed that the ancestors of tyrannosaurs came from Asia, but several large and very ancient forms are concentrated specifically in the southwest of North America, millions of years before T-Rex appeared further north, in Montana and Canada. The picture comes together on its own. The king of the dinosaurs grew up here. Asia has nothing to do with it. Until there's a complete skeleton, there's no name. Longrich continues the excavations and is hoping above all for teeth. They are preserved in stone better than large bones. But the main thing has already happened. The bone sat on the shelf for 7 years, with nobody paying attention to it. And all this time, it held a story that rewrites the origin of the most famous predator in the entire history of life on Earth. How many such stories are still lying in drawers with inventory numbers? The sunken port of Cleopatra. Off the coast near Taposiris Magna, west of Alexandria, archaeologists found a submerged area with signs of an ancient harbor. Kathleen Martinez's team, together with marine archaeologist Bob Ballard, describes rows of massive foundations estimated to be over 6 meters high. Cemented blocks, fragments of columns, amphorae for storage and transport. Most importantly, numerous anchors dating back to the era of Cleopatra VII. Such a set of items usually accompanies a working port, docking lines, storage areas, and navigational equipment. In 2022, an underground tunnel was discovered here, stretching 1,227 meters toward the Mediterranean Sea. Inside it, there were ceramics and objects from the Ptolemaic period. The harbor may have served the city complex, the Temple of Taposiri Toposiris, and Cleopatra's fleet. This is suggested by the dating and maritime profile of the finds. But we need test pits, dating based on the deposits and linking the structures to the ancient shoreline. If this is confirmed, we will get rare evidence of what the coastal network near the Ptolemaic capital looked like and how it functioned. Not in text, but in stone, wood, and iron. A ring with someone else's name, England, Lincolnshire. A man with a metal detector is walking through a field. The device detects something. He digs and pulls a silver ring with gilding out of the ground. As it turned out later, it had been lying in the earth for 1,000 years, a little over 2 centimeters in diameter, 4.5 grams. And along the edge, 16 runic symbols are engraved. And this is where things start to get strange. There is gilding on the ring everywhere except on the runes themselves. This means the inscription was made after the ring was crafted. Someone took a finished piece of jewelry and then separately scratched runes onto it. And in the grooves, they rubbed in a dark inlay to make the symbols visible. Scientists from the University of Nottingham have partly deciphered the inscription. It's possible that the name Udnan is encrypted there, and a word that resembles the ancient word for ring. But no one still understands the exact meaning. Runes are the writing system of the Germanic peoples before the Latin alphabet arrived. But they weren't always used for writing as we understand it. Often, they were symbols with a special meaning. Protective, ritual, and magical. Similar rings with the same unreadable inscriptions have already been found before, and now they are kept in the British Museum. And the meaning of these inscriptions still hasn't been deciphered. That's why researchers seriously believe that they could have been protective charms. You're wearing not just a piece of jewelry on your finger, but a spell that's meant to protect you. The ring is made finely and carefully. Archaeologists have called it one of the most remarkable finds of its type. It would have belonged to someone wealthy. Nearby, they also found an Anglo-Saxon buckle. That means there was an entire settlement here that no one knew about before, and people lived there who knew how to write, in an era that's called the Dark Ages. When only a few people were literate, someone wore a ring with a secret inscription on their finger, and what it means, we still haven't found out after 1,000 years. The Ust-Mindzinski chief's staff. In Europe and Siberia, during excavations of Paleolithic sites, strange objects made from deer antlers or mammoth tusks with one or several holes have been found repeatedly. Such objects were often decorated or had animal figurines on the top. One of the founders of modern archaeology, Gabriel de Marty, called them chief's staffs. Following him, many researchers saw these mysterious objects as distinctive symbols of the chief's or shaman's authority. Other scholars claimed that the staffs were connected to religious cults. There were also hypotheses that these were tools for straightening spears or devices for throwing spears. Such strange artifacts from Sungir, Vladimir region, Russia, and Sungirs from the Mazdazil cave are widely known. Their images have been published many times in magazines and books about prehistoric art. The chief's staff from the Ust-Menza site in Transbaikalia is much less known. It is made from deer antler and decorated with engravings in the form of a meander ornament, which features the following motifs: parallel lines, a ribbon stripe, a groove, a loop, and a segment. The ancient craftsmen carefully polished the item. Unfortunately, the staff has not survived in its entirety. It is broken right at the area of the hole. The find is about 18,000 years old. Books made from people. In the 18th and 19th centuries, there was a grim practice of binding books in human skin. This rare and shocking phenomenon was called anthropodermic bibliophagy. Some copies of medical or philosophical treatises, as well as personal diaries, could be bound in the skin of deceased people, most often in their memory. For example, some doctors use the skin of their patients to bind medical texts in order to immortalize their contribution to science. Books like this have become the subject of increased interest in research. Modern technologies, including DNA analysis and chemical tests, make it possible to determine whether the binding is really made from human skin. This phenomenon reflects not only the medical and scientific interests of the era, but also attitudes toward death, memory, and the body. Today, anthropodermic books are rare artifacts that evoke both horror and fascination, as well as serve as a reminder of the strange and contradictory traditions of the past. The mysterious Id Baraki. Turkic legends speak of a people with a human body and a dog's head, the Id Baraki. In the Oguz Khan tales, they are placed on the northwestern outskirts near Siberia. The name consists of Id, meaning dog, and Barak, a long-haired breed. The description is consistent: dark skin, mottled fur, a dog's skull. Oguz Khan once retreated before them, went into exile, and later returned and defeated them. He gave the conquered lands to his son Kipchak, ancestor of the Kipchaks. The Kipchak dog was linked to the legend of being born in a hollow tree. To understand why dog-headed people appeared in these stories, we must consider the role of dogs among early Turks. The dog is a helper and a guide, not an evil spirit. In the 12-year cycle, there is a year of the dog. In shamanic rituals, its behavior was imitated. In myths, the dog Barak carries the shaman upward, and in Altai stories, the dog guards the first people from Erlik. So one's own dog is protection and a connection with spirits. Against this background, the image of Idbaraki is that of an outsider, the same canine traits, but not a protector, rather a boundary and a threat. This approach is understandable. He marks the edge of our world and reminds us of the rules of behavior on foreign land. Parallels can also be found among our neighbors. Greek Akina Cynocephali, Indian canine guardians, European chronicles about northern tribes. The pattern is always the same. An unusual face is a sign of distance. One can argue whether there was a real impression at the core, masks, totemic headdresses, or distant neighbors with unfamiliar appearances. But for tradition, that's not necessary. In legends, those on the other side were called Idbarakami. That was how they marked the boundary of their world. The scarab in the setting. In one of the episodes of the show Pawn Stars, where people bring all sorts of rarities to the pawn shop, there was a story that perfectly shows how the price of an antiquity is actually determined. A woman brought in a gold ring with an ancient Egyptian scarab set into it, the sacred beetle, which the Egyptians made by the thousands as amulets. According to the family legend, the ring is more than 3,500 years old, from the time of the 18th dynasty, the same dynasty to which Tutankhamun and Nefertiti belonged. The woman expected to get $15,000 for such an item. An expert was called in. And that's when things got interesting. The expert takes the ring, looks at the scarab. Yes, he says, the beetle is real. This is an authentic ancient Egyptian artifact. Then he shifts his gaze to the setting itself, to the gold, and everything falls apart. The weaving, the technique, the style of work, all of this points not to ancient Egypt, but to the early 20th century. Around the year 1900. What does that mean? In those years, there was a real craze for Egypt in Europe and America. Everyone was obsessed with pharaohs and tombs, and enterprising people set up an entire business. They took real ancient scarabs, which were found in the Egyptian sand by the handful, and set them into brand new gold rings, and they sold them to tourists as ancient relics. So the beetle was ancient, but the ring was just a souvenir from 100 years ago. And the price reflected that. The expert valued the scarab itself at about $200 to $250. The gold was another $200. Instead of $15,000, the woman left with $360. And here's the main lesson. In archaeology, context is everything. An ancient item pulled out of its original context, a tomb, a layer of earth, and the history that comes with it, and set into a modern frame, stops being a museum treasure. It just turns into a vintage piece of jewelry with a cute beetle. The beetle itself hasn't changed a bit during this time. Everything around it has changed. I'm amazed that a genuine artifact from ancient Egypt, which is over 3,000 years old, is being sold for such a small amount of money. I would just keep it for myself, out of interest. And I don't care that the gold setting is a modern addition. Birch bark manuscripts are a unique written testimony of life in the Middle Ages, created with bone style on birch bark. They describe a wide variety of life relationships that people of the 11th to 15th centuries found themselves in. Trade, everyday conflicts, feudal obligations. Among the surviving notes are petitions and love letters, deeds of sale, wills, receipts, and even diets. They are written briefly, like posts in an ancient Twitter. Everything is straight to the point. The first scrolls were found in 1951 during the excavations in the Nerevsky district, one of the areas of Novgorod. Today, archaeologists and historians already have more than 1,000 birch bark documents. Such a number of finds has forced a reconsideration of views on the literacy of medieval people. It turned out that many people in Novgorod, including those of common status, could read and write. Rolex watch at the bottom of the ocean. Last summer, Australian surfer Matt Kadicki was diving off the coast of Noosa in search of something interesting on the seabed. Usually you find lost fins, snorkeling masks, and other beach trash there, but this time there was a watch lying on the bottom. The Rolex Submariner is one of the most iconic models of the Swiss brand and costs around $20,000. And what's most interesting is that it was still working. It had been lying on the ocean floor for several years and was still running. On the back cover, Matt found an engraving, presented in 1971. Most people in his place would have just sold the find, but Matt started looking for the owner through social media and found them pretty quickly. A man named Rick got in touch himself and said that his father had given him this watch more than 50 years ago for winning a sailing race. Rick had kept the gift with him all his life until he lost it in the ocean in 2019. After several years on the ocean floor, a random diver found them, and the watch returned to its owner in working condition. The phrase, reliable as a Swiss watch, took on a whole new meaning. 37 bodies in one jar. Northern Laos, the mountain forests on the Zhengkuang Plateau. There's a place there called the Plain of Jars. Hundreds of giant stone vessels are scattered across the valley, and most of them stand empty. Scientists didn't understand their purpose for a long time. Then an international team opened one of the jars, codenamed Object 7075, which was as tall as a person and more than 2 meters wide. Imagine a stone vessel the size of a small car, standing upright, and it wasn't empty. Inside were the remains of 37 people. Radiocarbon dating revealed an even stranger detail. The jar was used for 270 years, meaning people came here again and again, generation after generation, and placed their dead, grandfathers, fathers, children, all into the same jar. This happened roughly from the 9th to the 12th century AD, at a time when the Song dynasty was developing nearby in China and the Khmer Empire in Cambodia. But the bones were not placed there immediately after death. It turned out that this was done in 2 stages. First, the body was left to decompose, and only then were the individual bones transferred to the jar. The small jars nearby most likely served as a temporary place where the body finished decomposing, and when only the bones were left, they were moved to the others. Perhaps that's why most of the jars on the plain are empty. They were not graves, but transit points. As one of the excavation leaders said, in many cultures, decomposition is a transitional phase between death and the world of the ancestors. And the transfer of the bones meant that the transformation was complete. I wonder who these 37 people were. Relatives, one community, no one knows yet. Beads were found nearby, and analysis showed that the material was brought all the way from South India and Mesopotamia. So this place was connected to trade routes across half of Asia. And even today, it's hard to get there. Dense forests, mountains, and unexploded bombs left over from the Vietnam War. What do you think? Who were these 37 people in one jar? One family? Or something completely different? Write your thoughts in the comments. I'm interested to read your versions. Funerary bread of ancient Egypt. In the foundation offering of Hatshepsut's tomb, archaeologists discovered bread that had been there for about 3,500 years. These items date back to the New Kingdom era and were placed in the foundation as part of a ritual that accompanied the construction of the sacred space. In ancient Egypt, such offerings included food, vessels, and tools, which were sealed into the buildings at the foundation level, connecting them with the gods and with the fate of the deceased. Bread symbolized provision, order, and continuous existence. It was not meant to be eaten and was not considered a food supply. Its shape and structure were preserved thanks to isolation and the dry climate. Analysis showed coarse grain milling and impurities, which are characteristic of bread intended for ritual purposes. A rare giant book. Before you is one of 12 giant books from the 18th century written in Spanish. Its size is impressive, almost a meter in length. These books were created for religious ceremonies and contain detailed scripts of worship services. Leather binding, wooden covers, pages made from treated animal skin. All this made the book not only durable but also a symbol of the church's grandeur. Such manuscripts were intended for use in churches, where clergy and the choir could read the text from a distance. That's why the letters are so large. Today, this rarity is kept at the National Autonomous University of Mexico. Restoration scientists are carefully studying it, trying to preserve it in its original form. These books are a real window into the past, allowing us to see what liturgical texts looked like and what the attitude toward writing was in the era of colonial Latin America. Over 100,000 years old, researchers continue to uncover the mysteries of our evolution, now having discovered unusual footprints that are 115,000 years old in the northern part of Saudi Arabia. The footprints, preserved in a former mud pit in the middle of the Nafud Desert, amaze scientists because they appeared in a place where such ancient human traces were not expected to be found. According to estimates, these footprints belong to early representatives of Homo sapiens, not Neanderthals, which confirms the migration routes of human ancestors in changing climate conditions. Thanks to an amazing combination of factors, the absence of strong winds, and the peculiarities of the local climate, the structure of the footprints remained almost intact, allowing scientists to accurately date them and reconstruct the scene of a brief stop by ancient people at Lake Alethar during a dry period. This place seems to have served as a rest and watering point rather than a permanent settlement, as indicated by the absence of traces of tools or hunting. Some scientists believe that these footprints fit into the general migration route along which Homo sapiens moved from Africa to Eurasia. The new discoveries change our view of migration routes and vividly demonstrate how nature is able to carefully preserve the chronicle of life. Here's a story found on Google Maps not during expeditions. A biologist was looking at satellite images from northern Mozambique and saw a dark spot among the dry savanna, as if someone had taken a piece of jungle and stuck it onto a piece of rock. This is Mount Lico, a huge stone pillar in the middle of the plain with walls over 700 meters high. That's twice as tall as the Eiffel Tower, and the walls are almost vertical. The mountain itself is an island of hard volcanic rock, which erodes more slowly than everything that was around it. It used to be a single massif. Everything else has long since disappeared, but Lico still stands. An ordinary person can't climb up there, and at the top, there's a forest that's been cut off from the rest of the world for millions of years, untouched by anyone. Scientists went up there with climbers, and questions arose. The first mystery is the silence. An African forest is usually loud, whistling and singing with all kinds of voices. But here there were almost no birds. There are no physical barriers for them. There's plenty of food, but birds just don't go there, and no one understands why. The second mystery: since there are no birds, small creatures have multiplied. Spiders, caterpillars, new butterflies unknown to science, and rats the size of a cat. The third mystery is the soil. They expected a thin layer of soil on bare rock, but they found deep soil where large trees grow. This means the forest here is not just hundreds of years old, but at least thousands. Organic matter accumulated for thousands of years. And then, in a mountain stream at the summit, they saw a catfish, a real living fish. At the top, there are sheer cliffs. How did it get there, you might ask? It's impossible to answer this question for sure yet. Maybe birds once brought fish eggs there. Maybe it's a remnant of an ancient water system that no longer exists. We don't know the exact answer. And finally, near the stream, they found ancient clay pots. Someone left them there, but in ancient times, climbing this mountain without mountaineering equipment was simply impossible. Unreal. No way. Who brought the pots there? When and how? That's the fourth mystery. And for now, it remains unanswered. 4 mysteries on one mountain and not a single answer. How do you think the fish and pots got to the summit, which can't be climbed? Share your ideas in the comments. I'm curious to hear different theories. I think that some billionaire, after learning about this hard-to-reach place, will say, yes, this is exactly the place I've been looking for. I'll take it for myself. Shulgantash or Kapova Cave. Shulgantash in Bashkiria has been known to the local population since ancient times. Russian scientists became interested in it in the 18th century. So in 1760, the famous naturalist, geographer, and historian Pyotr Ivanovich Rychkov visited and gave the first detailed description of the cave. Then at different times, it was studied by academician Ivan Lepekin, forester Fyodor Simon, geologist Georgy Vakrushev, and many other scientists. Biologist Alexander Ryumin was the first to discover ancient human drawings in Shulgantash. In 1959, while examining one of the halls of the cave, which was later named the Hall of Drawings, Reumann discovered and documented colorful images of a horse, mammoths, a bull, and a woolly rhinoceros. Further research brought new discoveries: silhouettes of horses, a camel, a bison, a fish, geometric signs, spots, and anthropomorphic figures. The ancient artists worked in different techniques: drawing, engraving, and bas-relief. In total, about 200 images were discovered. The oldest of them are about 36,000 years old. The younger drawings, according to various datings, are between 17 and 20,000 years old. Most scientists agree that the cave was a sanctuary for primitive hunters, who followed the same traditions as the creators of cave paintings in Western Europe. To this day, Kapova Cave remains the only undisputed monument of Paleolithic cave art on the territory of Russia. Not an octopus, 300 million years. In 1988, in the state of Illinois, a small fossil was lifted from a layer of stone, unremarkable, just a bit larger than a palm. They examined it and saw 8 tentacles fins and a characteristic body shape. The surrounding rock is 300 million years old. This meant that octopuses appeared 150 million years earlier than science had previously believed. The article was published in 2000. Guinness added an entry for the oldest octopus on the planet. Evolution textbooks were updated, and dozens of studies on the history of cephalopod mollusks were rewritten from scratch, all based on a single unremarkable stone from Illinois. For 25 years, no one really paid much attention to this fossil. Then scientists from the University of Reading scanned it with a next-generation X-ray. It was so powerful that it revealed a structure inside the stone that ordinary light could never detect. It's kind of like an X-ray in a hospital, only 1,000 times brighter. And inside they found a tiny rasp with rows of teeth, an organ that all mollusks have without exception. An octopus has 7 or 9 teeth in each row. Here, there were 11. It wasn't an octopus, but a relative of the nautilus, a marine mollusk in a coiled shell that has survived to this day almost unchanged, and which is sometimes called a living fossil. The creature had partially decomposed before it fossilized, and after several weeks of decomposition, its shape changed so much that for 25 years, everyone thought it was an octopus. The Guinness editorial team commented briefly, "The record is being removed until new evidence appears. Octopuses now appear in the history of life on Earth much later, and the whole picture of their evolution changed because of a single analysis." At the same time, the fossils from Illinois turned out to be the oldest soft tissues of a nautilus relative in the world. They broke the previous record by as much as 220 million years. The mistake led to another discovery, and here's what's most alarming. This fossil had been lying in the museum for 25 years with the correct label. It was cited in serious scientific papers and taught to students. How many exhibits are standing behind glass right now with the same kind of incorrect labels, and is quietly waiting for a new X-ray? Algerian Atlantis. The underwater part of Tapasa is being studied just as seriously today as the ruins on the shore. Divers and marine archaeologists are documenting amphorae, cisterns, and storage niches, and most importantly, the pier carved into the rock, which looks like an engineering structure, not just a random landform. These fragments come together to form a picture of a port that operated from at least the 4th century BC to the 3rd century AD, moreover. The nature of the finds suggests regular trade, not just occasional dumping into the sea. UNESCO insists on expanding protection of the surrounding waters because the surf quickly erodes the cultural layer. And without official status, the site is vulnerable to intensive diving. And then we will lose even what we have managed to see. The team is recovering artifacts that were spotted back in the spring and is following the dark outlines of the site with new equipment. But only a series of dives and analysis of the sediments will give the final answer. Before us is a sunken city that was carried away by the sea, or the lower tier of an ancient harbor, which gradually settled beneath the waves. What grabs me here is not the word Atlantis, but the chance to look into how a real port actually worked, which was sustained by 3 different eras at once: Phoenician, Roman, and Byzantine. If we manage to record the layout of the docks and cisterns, we will finally understand exactly what the coastal hub looked like, about which the sources were silent, but the sea still preserves. Yucca the mammoth. Permafrost is a treasure chest of the planet. The treasures, however, look rather shabby at first glance. Sometimes the fur comes off in clumps, sometimes the tail falls off, but every discovery delights the scientific community. In Yakutia, in the permafrost, they have found cave lions, woolly rhinoceroses, Lena horses, and mammoths. Their total number could already make up a decent-sized herd. The biggest sensation of recent times was a baby mammoth that died about 34,000 years ago on the shore of the Laptov Sea. The young female was named Yuka, after the granddaughter of the Yukagir community leader, whose members found the carcass in summer 2010. It was preserved perfectly, with soft tissues, tusks, light-colored fur, a trunk, a brain, and even claw marks from ancient cave lions. All of this helped scientists extract, even if only partially, the DNA. A large number of skeletons of ancient giants, including the very first one discovered in 1799, can be seen at the Mammoth Museum in Yakutsk. A saint instead of a king. Norfolk, England. Once again a metal detectorist. This time near the village of Dunton. And this time, a 9th century gold coin pendant. On one side, a bearded face in profile, and by the Latin inscription it was identified. This is John the Baptist. And on the reverse, a fragment of text has survived, which was deciphered as Baptist and Evangelist. And this is almost impossible. The thing is, in that era, during the time of the Carolingians, coins in Western Europe depicted rulers, kings, emperors, those who held power, not saints. But here, on gold, there is a religious figure. The coin expert said directly that not a single other Carolingian coin with John the Baptist is known. Not a single one at all. Such images were common in Byzantium, on the other side of Europe, but not here. It gets even worse. The script points to the end of the 9th century, around the 860s to 870s, and it was around 870 that East Anglia was captured by the Vikings. And at that time, the Vikings were not really Christians yet. So how did a gold coin with a Christian, saintly, Byzantine style end up in the lands of the pagan Vikings? It turns out that there was much more interaction between the Vikings and Christians than historians used to think. We are used to imagining the Vikings as pagans who came to burn monasteries. But it turns out that ideas, symbols, and faith crossed cultural boundaries much more easily than previously thought, and someone in the Viking lands wore gold with a Christian saint around their neck. One small coin will cast doubt on an entire chapter of the textbook. Right now it is being examined under the British treasure law, and the museum in Norwich already has its eye on it. Red mystical spheres. In the south of the Canadian province of Alberta, in the Red Rock Coulee area, dozens of stone spheres lie scattered across the steppe, far apart from each other. They look as if they were deliberately placed across the landscape. Some have a diameter of more than 2.5 meters. Their weight is measured in tons, and their shape is close to a perfect circle. The surface is colored a rich reddish-brown, which stands out especially against the light soil. These formations were created millions of years ago inside sedimentary rocks. Within the sandstone, cement made of minerals dissolved in underground water gradually built up around a solid core. Over time, the soft rock was eroded by wind and precipitation, while the dense cores emerged on the surface. The iron in the minerals oxidized and gave the stones their distinctive color. Inside the spheres, a concentric structure is often visible, and sometimes cracks radiate strictly outward from the center. One of the spheres is split almost perfectly in half, which allows us to see its layered structure. Geologists use these objects as a clear example of processes that usually remain hidden underground. The place remains hard to reach with no tourist infrastructure or roads around. This preserves the sense of isolation and enhances the visual effect. The stones lie motionless, not forming lines or circles, each in its own place like frozen fragments of a long-completed process. These spheres are not related to human activity, but often end up at the center of discussion precisely because of their shape. They show how complex and precise structures geology can create without the involvement of intelligence. A skull not of our ancestor. In 1960, a skull was found in the Petrolona cave in northern Greece, embedded in the wall with limestone. Since then, its age and evolutionary place have been debated. Estimates have ranged from 170 to 700,000 years, and interpretations from early Homo sapiens to an ancient European on an unusual evolutionary line. New research has narrowed the window to no younger than 277,000 years. Homo heidelbergensis, ancestor of Neanderthals, who lived in Europe during the Middle Pleistocene, is most similar to Homo in characteristics. However, this is not a definitive answer. The dating depends on the layer and the method, and the skull itself has gone through a long history of research. But the picture is becoming clearer. At this time, early Neanderthal populations were already present in Europe, and the Petrolona specimen fits into this group. Based on the condition of the teeth, he is considered a young man. There is something else important as well. The find records the presence of ancient humans in the region long before the classic Neanderthal sites, and before the appearance of anatomically modern humans in Europe. Petrolona is used as a testing ground. Here, dates, morphology, and the results of new scans are compared. For now, the conclusion is cautious. The find is rare, but its features fit into the lineage of European Neanderthal ancestors. This has been preserved for 20 million years. In the mid-19th century, farmers in Sioux County, Nebraska began to notice strange things right in their fields. Stone spirals stuck out of the ground, twisted perfectly like a corkscrew, as thick as a human arm, and some even taller than a person. No one understood what they were or where they came from, and pretty quickly people started calling them devil's corkscrews because there just wasn't any reasonable explanation. In 1891, a scientist and geologist named Irvin Barber finally came to see them. He studied the samples and found out that the spirals were fossils, sand-filled tubes with fibrous walls that were clearly of biological origin, but he couldn't figure out exactly what they were. The first theory was about giant freshwater sponges, which seemed logical right up until geologists noticed that the rock around the corkscrews didn't resemble the bottom of an ancient lake at all. It looked more like a dry step. Barber switched to the theory about fossilized plants. But then everyone noticed the bones. Inside the spiral, there were bones of small rodents. And even in the Cretaceous period, plants didn't drag rodents inside themselves. In 1893, two scientists independently came to the same conclusion. These were burrows, ancient burrows that filled with sand and fossilized. Barber didn't give up and said that the shape was too perfect for some animals dwelling, that animals don't dig so perfectly. The argument was finally settled by scratches on the inner walls, claw marks that someone left when the ground was still soft and wet. In 1905, the culprit was identified. It turned out to be Paleocastor, an ancient beaver about the size of a marmot, who lived here 20 million years ago, with short tails, small ears, and incredibly long front teeth that grew quickly so they wouldn't wear down from constant digging. This small animal braced its hind legs on the central axis and screwed itself into the ground, creating the perfect spiral. At a depth of about a meter, the burrow widened into side chambers for sleeping and raising the young. Sometimes there were separate recesses, which scientists believe were used as toilets or water containers, and the spiral entrance protected against predators. It's easy to stick a paw into a straight burrow, but much harder into a spiral one. Paleocastors disappeared when the climate on the planet became dry and hot, and forests gave way to endless plains. But their burrows still stick out of the hills in Nebraska National Park, 22 million years later, with a shape so perfect that a world-renowned geologist couldn't figure out what it was for 40 years. Tolbaginski Bear. One of the oldest sculptures in modern-day Asia was found in 1979 at the Paleolithic settlement of Tolbaga in the valley of the Kilok River. It is a figurine of a bear's head made 35,000 years ago from the odontoid process of the second cervical vertebra of a woolly rhinoceros. With only a few chisel strokes, the primitive sculptor shaped the bone into a real animal's head. By smoothing the natural ridge on the blank, he marked the slightly protruding lower lip with a groove and carefully highlighted the slightly raised tip of the nose, which gives the sculpture a special liveliness. The small bear eyes on the sculpture are barely discernible. Interestingly, no bear bones were found at the settlement itself. However, there were many bones of the woolly rhinoceros, reindeer, horse, and bison. Perhaps the Tolbogensi revered the bear and did not hunt it. Later, the cult of this animal became widespread among many peoples of Eurasia.
Омлету 7000 лет.
A short but tasty story. You'll like it. In the south of Israel, not far from Nitzana, archaeologists uncovered a stash of eggs that are 7,000 years old, and nearby, the remains of a hearth. The picture speaks for itself. The ancient nomads of the desert gathered eggs, made a fire, and cooked them right on the spot. One egg was literally lying inside the hearth. The arrangement shows this isn't an abandoned bird clutch, but a purposely collected stash. Basically, scientists unearthed the site of an ancient breakfast, an omelet that's 7,000 years old, and these weren't chicken eggs. One ostrich egg is as nutritious as about 25 regular eggs. So just one was enough to feed an entire group. No wonder the eggs were so highly valued. They made water flasks from the strong shells, placed them in graves, and used them as luxury items. But interestingly, archaeologists often find eggs, but almost no ostrich bones. Apparently, ancient people thought, why kill an ostrich if you can just collect its eggs? They didn't touch the bird, only took the clutches. In essence, they cared about future harvests long before people even started thinking about such things. By the way, ostriches themselves lived in these areas until the 19th century, until they were completely exterminated. And the eggs survived thanks to the deserts. The sand covered the site and preserved it. And after 7,000 years, the dunes revealed it again. The amber cup. This magnificent amber cup, which is about 3,270 years old, was found in a large round barrow in Hove, England, during excavations in 1856. Amber is a material known for its beauty and is associated with the sun and life energy. In ancient times, it was used not only for jewelry, but also for ritual purposes. According to researchers, the cup that was found could have been an item of high status, belonging to an important member of society or a chief. Creating such a cup required exceptional skills, since amber is a fragile material and working with it demands patience and craftsmanship. The discovered cup indicates that people of that time had access to rare and valuable materials, which also confirms the existence of trade connections and exchanges with other regions. The fact that the cup was buried together with its owner speaks to its significance for burial rituals or beliefs in the afterlife. The Malta Plate. At the Malta settlement in the Irkutsk region, archaeologists found several dozen sculptures. For example, the elegant female figurines called Venuses evoke surprise and admiration among art lovers. Among the numerous finds, an ornamented bone plate draws attention. A spiral ornament starts from the hole in its center, consisting of 243 pits. On the sides and the lower corners, there are ordinary spirals, and in the upper corners, there are spirals with ends curved in the shape of the Latin letter S. On the reverse concave side, the plate is decorated with wavy lines, probably depicting snakes. It is possible that the plate is an ancient calendar in which mythological beliefs of its creators are encoded. Among many peoples, snakes are associated with the underworld. Spirals are associated with ideas of cyclicity and the recurrence of phenomena. Archaeologist Alexander Formozov noted that the number of pits in the central spiral corresponds to 2/3 of the solar year and the gestation period of a female reindeer. Obviously, ancient hunters were well aware of the biology of reindeer and built their calendar based on the natural cycles of these animals, glass that has survived for centuries. In one of the museums in Europe, there is an object that at first glance looks like a designer bowl from a modern glass workshop. Thin strips of colored glass twist into a spiral, forming a dense, even pattern. But this item is about 2,250 years old. It was made during the Hellenistic era. At that time, craftsmen did not yet know how to blow glass. That technology appeared later. The bowl was made by hand. The thinnest threads of molten glass were wound onto a mold, layer by layer, until the vessel reached the desired size and pattern. Each thread was laid with millimeter precision. The colored spirals have not faded, and the glass has not become cloudy. The vessel has kept its shape as if it just came off the craftsman's workbench yesterday. Such items rarely survive to our time. Glass breaks, cracks, and shatters easily. That's why each such item is a window into the past, into a craft that stood at the intersection of art and technology. The bowl shows that ancient craftsmen were neither simpler nor more primitive than us. They already knew how to work with the material as if they understood its possibilities better than we do. A gift from the fairies. In Dunvegan Castle on the Isle of Skye, under glass, hangs a piece of cloth that the MacLeod clan calls the fairy flag, a magical relic. It looks like worn silk with a yellowish-brown background and red dots that used to be golden crosses, about 45 centimeters long. In the 20th century, it was sealed in an airtight display case to prevent the fabric from falling apart. Its origin is a subject of debate. The English archaeologist Alan Wace suggested that it was Syrian or Greek silk. It might even be part of a relic. The head of the clan answered simply, "It was given to my ancestor by fairies." There are 3 theories about its origin. In one version, the clan's ancestor returned from the crusade, defeated a spirit called the Daughter of Thunder on a hermit's advice, and made a banner and staff from her belt and spear. In the second version, a fairy stole the crying infant heir from the tower at night with a silk scarf. In the morning, her singing was heard in the hall. In the third version, the chieftain married a fairy, and when they parted on the ferry bridge, she gave him a silk cloth and said, "It will give the clan 3 victories, no more." The banner was credited not only with military luck, it was used to heal livestock, ask for a good harvest, and even lure herring into the lake near Dunvegan. But according to legend, its power works only 3 times. After that, the cloth disappears, and the clan will be left without protection. It is believed that it was unfurled twice in the 14th and 15th centuries, and only one use remains. During World War II, a rumor claimed Churchill asked the MacLeods to raise the banner for the Allies, but the clan refused, saving their last chance. Today, the banner still hangs in a sealed display case between the theory that the silk came from far away and the family's belief in the fairy's gift. For a museum worker, it's a rare fabric with a complicated history. For the clan, it's an insurance policy that can't be wasted. In both cases, this piece of silk continues to do its job. It preserves memory and sets the boundaries of what people are willing to believe, for those who have a flag with 3 chances hanging above their hearth. A visitor from ancient Egypt. In the rock-cut tomb of Per, archaeologists found something completely unexpected here. A tiny faience ptahikos, an Egyptian god protector, guardian of the path to the afterlife. It was lying among beads, amulets, and the other remains of the 14 buried. For Anatoly, this is a rarity. In the publications of the Adiyaman Museum, such a find is called the first recorded here. It's immediately clear the main thing isn't a pretty trinket, but a functional amulet placed there on purpose. Ptahikos in Egypt holds back evil, wards off diseases and bites, and accompanies you through dangerous passages. If such an amulet ended up in Kamagina's Hellenistic tomb, it means the family accepted Egyptian protection as part of their ritual. Peristoil stood at the crossroads of Anatolia and the Mediterranean. From here came trade connections and the rapid migration of ideas, but trade alone cannot explain this. An alien symbol was added to the local wires for the deceased, along with the usual beads and pendants. What stood out to me was the use of the word alien. The Egyptian amulet does not conflict with the Anatolian form of burial nearby. It completes it, creating a sense of a collected set of protection. The small figurine shows how easily ancient societies incorporated useful foreign symbols into their beliefs. A tunnel to nowhere. Under Jerusalem, before the construction of a new district, archaeologists were conducting a routine survey of the area. There was nothing ancient underground. It was a routine, almost daily job, until they fell through. Literally, they stumbled upon a natural void in the rock, and it turned out to be the entrance to a long underground tunnel. The tunnel stretches for more than 50 meters. The height is about 5 meters. In some places, the width reaches up to 3 meters. This is not just a natural crack. You can walk through it standing upright. Part of it has collapsed, part of it is blocked. The tunnel is filled with soil that has accumulated there for hundreds, maybe even thousands of years. And most importantly, scientists are sure that this is not a natural formation. The tunnel was dug by people, by hand. And again, archaeologists and historians have many questions. Who made it, when, and why? No one knows. At first, they thought it was an ancient aqueduct leading to a spring, but they didn't find any water sources nearby, and the walls are not plastered. That's not how it's done for water. Otherwise, it would all seep into the rock. Later, another theory appeared, that it's a mine, dug for the chalk layer, for building stone or for lime. But that's just a version as well. There's no evidence. It's also impossible to determine the age. They didn't find a single item inside that could be used for dating. No pottery shards, no coins, nothing. There's only one clue so far. Nearby, there are ruins of an Iron Age settlement. If the tunnel was dug back then, It means it's between 2.5 to 3,000 years old. Just imagine, someone carved out a passage in the rock as long as half a football field and as tall as 1.5 times a person's height. They moved tons of rock by hand. They spent months, maybe even years on this. And then this passage was forgotten so completely that thousands of years later we stumbled upon it by accident and still don't know what it was for. An entire structure without a single clue about who built it or why. Spiny dragon, 125 million years. In northeastern China, paleontologists uncovered another dinosaur skeleton and stopped. Skin appeared under the brush. Not a faint imprint in the stone, not a blurry outline, but real fossilized skin covered with spikes. The dinosaur belonged to a group of herbivores that scientists have been studying for almost 200 years, and which has long been considered one of the best studied in paleontology. In 2 centuries of discoveries, no spikes have been found in this group, not in any species. Here the spikes were of different sizes all over the body, and the tail was additionally covered with overlapping scales, like roof tiles, layer by layer. It was unofficially called the spiny dragon, but the real sensation wasn't the spikes themselves. Scientists examined the skin under a powerful microscope and got down to the individual cells, the very ones that make up the spikes, after 125 million years underground. For comparison, the spikes were made of the same material as our nails and hair. Under normal conditions, this material would break down in just a few decades. In human burials, it disappears completely. For it to survive 125 million years, a perfect combination of circumstances was needed in the first hours after the animal's death. The right soil, the right temperature, the right rate of burial in sediment. Thousands of other dinosaurs with similarly interesting skin simply dissolved without a trace. We were lucky with this one. Scientists haven't yet determined why herbivores need spikes. Maybe it's for protection from predators. Maybe it's for regulating body temperature. Some dinosaurs used large growths on their backs for this purpose. Maybe it was to sense their surroundings. There's no comparison, as nothing like this has ever been found. This group has been studied for nearly 200 years, and suddenly, a species that shouldn't exist, with skin that shouldn't have been preserved. Write in the comments how many more secrets like this you think are still buried underground, and subscribe so you don't miss it when they find the next one. Could these discoveries really be 300 million years old? From time to time, miners find strange artifacts in coal seams that appear to have been made by intelligent beings. This raises uncomfortable questions for science. After all, the age of these layers is estimated at 300 million years. How could objects that were clearly made by hand end up there? Back then, the Earth was inhabited only by giant insects and the first reptiles. There was no question of humans, dinosaurs, or even more so, advanced technologies. However, the discoveries continue to amaze. In 1912, an iron kettle was extracted from a coal seam in the state of Oklahoma. And in 1851, a vase made of zinc and silver was discovered in Massachusetts. The age of the rock it was found in is 534 million years. In Russia, a metal rod resembling a toothed rack was found, made of aluminum with an admixture of magnesium. Its origin is even more mysterious. Aluminum was only discovered in 1825, and the age of the coal in which it was found exceeds 300 million years. Scientists found that the metal was impregnated with carbon, which confirms its incredible age. But if that's the case, who made it? Some believe that these findings are traces of a vanished civilization that existed long before us, but was wiped from the face of the planet by a global catastrophe. Others suggest that the objects could have been left by aliens or even time travelers. Skeptics, in turn, are convinced that these are either hoaxes or mistakes in dating. There is also a theory that coal was formed not millions of years ago, but only a few thousand years ago, under the influence of gases from deep underground and pressure. If that's the case, the artifacts may turn out to be not so ancient after all. A find from a toilet in Paderborn, Germany. Archaeologists were digging at a construction site and uncovered a medieval toilet, a cesspit that was sealed almost 800 years ago. They found 5 such airtight pits there at once. It doesn't sound very appetizing, but thanks to that, an amazing object has survived. At first, they thought it was just a lump of dirt, but when they cleaned it in the lab, it turned out to be a small wooden notebook about the size of a palm. 10 pages covered in wax in a leather case with a lily pattern, and in the Middle Ages, the lily was a symbol of royal power. They wrote on the wax with a stylus, scratched a note, erased it, wrote it again. A medieval notebook for drafts, without oxygen, in a sealed pit. Wood, wax, leather, and even fabric lasted for centuries without rotting. In regular soil, there wouldn't be a trace of them left. The restorer claims that even after so many centuries, the find from the cesspit still smelled decent. The pages have Latin cursive. Some lines overlap each other, as if they were written in different directions. So deciphering it will take time. But scientists believe that the book belonged to a merchant. At that time, only a few people could read and write, and merchants were part of this literate elite. Most likely deals and daily tasks were recorded in the notebook. It's something like a medieval planner, and nearby in the same pit, they found barrels, baskets, ceramics, a knife, and scraps of silk, expensive fabric, cut into neat strips. Why would there be strips of silk in a toilet? That's an interesting question. The restorer suggested exactly what you're already thinking. A long time ago, elegant silk fabric was thrown away and used as toilet paper. 80 years ago, someone wiped themselves with silk. That's expensive and luxurious. That makes sense. Practically speaking, I would disagree with that. Princess Ukoka. In 1993, a group of archaeologists chose one of the already looted burial mounds on the Ukok Plateau in the Akalaha River Valley in the Altai Mountains for excavation. No one thought anything valuable or important for science could be found there. But beneath the burial mound that had been looted in ancient times, the scientists discovered an even older Paziric burial that the thieves hadn't reached. The grave was completely encased in ice. After breaking through the icy shroud, the archaeologists discovered a perfectly preserved mummy of a young woman, about 25 to 28 years old, with tattoos, fully dressed, and with an incredibly elaborate hairstyle, almost a meter high. Next to her, the remains of 6 horses with rich harnesses and household items were found. Mummies had been discovered in Paziric culture burials before, but this was the first time a female mummy was found. The study of the mummy took years. A reconstruction of the appearance of the woman who lived at the end of the 4th century BC was also carried out. It turned out that before the body was buried, it was embalmed using mercury. Herbs were placed in the place of the removed organs. Although the media were quick to call her a princess, the girl seemed to belong to the middle class of Paziric society, and by today's standards, it's hard to call her a beauty. However, she was quite stately. Her height was about 170 centimeters. She belonged to the Europoid race of the Finno-Ugric type. Based on tissue analysis, the White Lady, or Akadine, as the Altai people call her, died of stage 4 breast cancer. Quarry, 220,000 years. In South Africa, scientists from Germany began digging in a place where sharp, hard stones were sticking out of the ground. They were well suited for making cutting tools. They sifted every cubic meter of soil by hand to make sure they didn't miss a single fragment. And they found from 200,000 to 2 million worked fragments per cubic meter. That's not a typo. Thousands of traces of work, stones used to test the strength of the rock, tiny chips from processing, heavy hammer stones. At the same time, there were almost no finished tools, no traces of dwellings, no food remains. People came here, did a little stone processing, took the blanks with them, and left, purposefully, like going to work. Dating showed that this place was used from 220,000 to 110,000 years before our era, for 100,000 years in a row. For comparison, the entire history of Egypt from the first pharaoh to the present day is about 5,000 years. Rome, from its founding to its fall, lasted less than 3,000 years, and the knowledge about this particular place with good stone was passed down from hand to hand 20 times longer than everything we call the history of humanity. Without books, without maps, without records, a father showed his son where to go, and so it went on for 100,000 years straight. One of the researchers took 353 found fragments and began putting them back together, matching the breaks like a 3-dimensional puzzle. In the end, he restored the original rock blocks and literally saw exactly how the craftsman worked. 200,000 years ago, how he held the stone where he struck what he wanted to achieve. Previously, it was thought ancient people randomly picked up stones as they traveled. This site showed that they knew where the best material was, planned their routes, and organized the extraction. 220,000 years before any writing, before any city, before any state. A set that is 1,100 years old. Saudi Arabia, the archaeological site of Daria, in the Al-Qasi region. More than 100 gold ornaments over 1,100 years old were found in the ground. They're so well preserved, it seems like they were just taken off yesterday and covered with sand. Pendants, gold discs, colorful beads, and a large disc-shaped ornament studded with colored stones around a central pattern. Scientists believe that all of this was once a single luxurious set of jewelry, worn on major holidays and special occasions. Floral patterns within geometric ornaments are the signature style of Islamic art from the Abbasid era. That very caliphate, which was famous for science, literature, luxury, and trade across half the world. Everything is made very meticulously. The craftsmen hammered out the thinnest sheets of gold, pressed patterns into the metal, and carefully set colorful stones into the settings. And the stones themselves, apparently, were brought from far away. This means that trade connections stretched to this place from 1,000 kilometers away. Who the gold belonged to is unknown. Maybe a wealthy family, maybe merchants, or maybe a pilgrim. Nearby ran the Basran Hajj route, the road along which people traveled from Iraq to Mecca. Imagine a caravan 1,000 years ago spending the night near this city on the way to the holy sites. One traveler carried a full set of gold jewelry. In this area, they found both jewelry and an entire settlement. Stone foundations, walls made of clay bricks, plastered rooms, hearths, ovens, shards of glass and ceramics. So this was not a temporary camp and not a treasure buried in an open field, but a thriving 9th century city through which faith, trade, and gold flowed. This once again proves that the desert trade routes of that era were lively and rich arteries, not just roads through the sand. Zaraisk Bisan. In 2001, just 145 kilometers from Moscow, during excavations at the Zaraisk site, archaeologists found a unique sculpture of a bison made from mammoth tusk. The animal figurine was lying in a hollow near the hearths of Paleolithic hunters. The prehistoric craftsman realistically captured the beast's form, highlighting all its features. In particular, he carefully carved the bison's characteristic hump, horns, and powerful legs. With engraved strokes, he depicted the fur on the withers, forehead, and neck. Notably, the figurine's left legs are broken off. There are also damages on the left side of the body, apparently caused by blows from a hard object. Before placing the sculpture in the pit, the prehistoric human painted it with red ochre. These facts allow us to suggest that the figurine was used in rituals intended to ensure success in hunting. The bison is kept in the archaeology collection of the Zaraisk Kremlin. Thousands of eyes on Earth. In the 1930s, the Atlantic coast of the United States was photographed from an airplane for the first time, and people were left breathless. The entire coastline from New Jersey to Florida was dotted with thousands of oval depressions, resembling lunar craters, as if the Earth is looking at you with thousands of identical eyes, and all these eyes are squinting in the same direction. Because these ovals long axes are aligned strictly northwest to southeast, thousands of depressions line hundreds of kilometers of coastline, and the farther north you go, the more rotation there is. In Georgia, the angles are one way, in Virginia, they're different. And if you mentally extend all these axes, they converge at roughly the same point, somewhere around southeastern Indiana and southwestern Ohio. They call them the Carolina Bays, although they're not bays at all. Where they came from is still debated. The first theory is an appealing one. A swarm of meteorites struck the Earth. Perfect oval shapes, a unified orientation. And it would seem that everything fits. Modern instruments disprove this theory. The depressions are too shallow for craters, and no meteorite fragments or impact traces have been found. The second theory sounds more Hollywood-like. A comet crashed into a glacier above the Great Lakes. Chunks of ice were thrown into the sky. They came crashing down like hail onto the softened coastal ground, leaving slanted dents. And that's exactly why all the axes point to the Great Lakes. The third theory is boring, but it's the most popular among scientists. During the Ice Age, there were constant hurricane-force winds. Currents would swirl in the small lakes, and for thousands of years, the water carved the shores into a perfect oval. The wind always blew in one direction, That's why the eyes all face the same direction. But none of the theories fully explain this anomaly. And while scientists argue the bays themselves have turned into protected oases, only here, in the wild, within 100 kilometers around a single city, grows the legendary Venus flytrap, a plant that eats insects. Because the soil around is too poor, carnivorous flowers in the mysterious eyes of the planet. And also here, in the still water without fish, very rare frogs breed there undisturbed. And now, what is happening to them right now, in 2026? There used to be as many as 500,000 such bays. Today, only a few hundred remain. The rest were consumed by fields, logging, and construction. During the war, one large bay was even turned into a bombing range. And after a recent court decision, many of them lost state protection. And these unique eyes of the earth could simply start being used for fields, for farming, cosmic or wind magic. Whose side are you on? Write in the comments. Carved stone spheres. A Neolithic settlement in Scotland became the site of a unique discovery. Hundreds of perfectly polished stone spheres decorated with spirals and concentric circles. These artifacts, dated to the 4th and 3rd millennia BC, are striking for their high level of stone craftsmanship. The spheres are made from different types of rock, from fragile sandstone to durable granite. They show workmanship clearly not meant for utilitarian purposes. One theory suggests that the spheres could have been sling projectiles, but this is unlikely due to the great effort invested in their creation. Another hypothesis is that they were used as weights for scales, but the variety in ornamentation casts doubt on this theory as well. Some researchers lean toward the idea that the spheres had ritual significance. The ornaments could have been symbolic, and the spheres themselves were used in religious ceremonies. However, there is still not enough evidence to support this theory, and the Scottish stone spheres remain one of the most intriguing mysteries of the European Neolithic. These mysterious artifacts continue to spark interest and debate among archaeologists, highlighting the richness and complexity of Neolithic culture. Did the first forest appear in Russia? In Russia, near Luga, in the Tolmachevsky quarry, they found something you usually see in textbooks, not in the sand of a quarry: a petrified stump with real roots. The age is about 385 million years. This is the late Devonian, a time when the land was just beginning to turn green. At first, everyone thought it was Prototaxites, the ancient column-shaped organisms famous in this area, but the roots settled it. This is not a column fungus, but an actual tree. An amateur paleontologist discovered a large, unusual piece in the sand and showed it to specialists. Scientists from St. Petersburg State University then got involved. They excavated, documented, and sent the specimen to the lab, where thin section and tissue analysis will help determine its species and age more precisely. It's important that the first forests were already here. The root system held the soil, changed water runoff, and influenced the carbon balance. Simply put, this was the beginning of the forested planet we're used to. You can pile up a lot of scientific terms here, but the essence is simple. The scientists went looking for a giant fungus, but they found the ancestor of our forests. Now they have to compare the specimen with known Devonian trees and determine exactly what it was. Even if the species name is still in question, the discovery itself already reshapes our understanding of the region's past. The knight who never existed. Barcelona, Pedralbes Monastery. For the 700th anniversary of the monastery, archaeologists opened several tombs from the 14th century. They wanted to learn more about the life of the first women's community. And among these tombs was the grave of Queen Elisenda de Moncada. This woman, at the age of 30, married the 50-year-old king of Aragon. She became his fourth wife and stepmother to his 10 children, and one of the most powerful queens of medieval Europe. After being widowed, she founded this monastery and lived there until the age of 70, by the way. This was confirmed. There are signs of age-related osteoarthritis on them. Everything matches the historical account. She herself was buried modestly in monastic clothing in a simple wooden box. But traces of gold-embroidered silk and fragrant herbs, rosemary and myrtle, were found in the tomb. So far, everything seems normal. But then comes something that science cannot explain. In the tomb of the monastery's first abbess, a puncture wound from a knife was found on the skull. In another grave, where records indicated a knight was buried, there were no male bones, only 2 adult women and 3 children. In the third tomb, bones of at least 9 people were buried at different times. Among them were 4 male skulls with stab wounds and a mummified torso of a pregnant woman with the remains of an unborn child inside. Let's go over it again to understand. The abbess of a convent with a stab wound in her skull. 4 men stabbed to death within the walls of a convent where there shouldn't have been any men at all. A pregnant woman with a baby right next to the queen's own tomb. This isn't an ancient battlefield or a looted cemetery. This is a quiet convent that the queen founded for prayer. And to this day, no one can answer who these people are, how they got here, or why they were killed. Now, DNA is being extracted from the bones and teeth to understand who these people were. Were they related, and did they carry traces of ancient diseases? Maybe they'll find the answer. Or maybe the mystery of the quiet convent will remain a secret behind 7 seals. Steak from an ancient bison. In 1979, gold prospectors in Alaska stumbled upon what they first thought was an ordinary piece of rock. But under the layer of ice there was a body. Not a human, not a mammoth, but a bison, almost untouched. They called him Blue Babe because of the bluish tint of his skin, which was caused by a reaction between iron and the surrounding rock. He died about 50,000 years ago during the Pleistocene era. Judging by the marks on the carcass, he was killed by a cave lion. But the main thing is how well he was preserved. Thanks to the permafrost, the tissue remained dense, almost like jerky. The hair, muscles, and skin are all intact. This was the first step bison specimen ever found in this condition. When the research was finished, the project leader, paleontologist Dale Guthrie, decided to celebrate with dinner. He took a small piece of meat from the neck, stewed it with onions, carrots, and spices, and served it to his colleagues. The meat turned out to be tough with a strong, earthy flavor. Someone described the aroma as mushroom-like or damp and glacial. No one was poisoned. Everyone survived. This case became a legend because it's not every day you have dinner from an animal that died tens of thousands of years before you. And although it was a scientific experiment, not a gastronomic show, it reminds us of the past, and sometimes it returns not to a museum, but right to the table. The mythical gold mine. In 1929, Australia found its own Indiana Jones, Lewis Harold Bell Lassiter. He claimed that 3 decades earlier, he had discovered a massive gold reef in the very heart of the continent. There was almost no evidence, but rumors of a lost Klondike stirred up prospectors and historians. In 1930, Lassiter managed to organize an expedition and set off into the outback once again. He was accompanied by a pilot, 2 gold prospectors, Aboriginal guides, and even a representative of the governor. However, Lassiter behaved sullenly, contradicted himself in his stories, and was reluctant to show the way. Upon reaching Mount Marjorie, he claimed that they were lost. His companions considered him an imposter and left. Lassiter was left only with a hunter, but soon he abandoned him as well. In the end, Harold continued on alone. A year later, he was found dead in a cave. Judging by his diary, he died of exhaustion, having spent his last months among Aboriginal people, trying to survive. Meanwhile, the legend of the reef did not fade. Numerous seekers combed the McDonnell Range in hopes of finding gold. The press discussed the mysterious Swede, Olof Johansson, who supposedly also knew the way to the treasure. Later, books and movies appeared. Director Luke Walker, in the Lassiter's Bones Project, found Harold's letters mentioning that very Olaf and hinting at the lost reef. Modern research has not confirmed large deposits in the designated area, although geologist Bill DeCarly came across a quartz seam that resembled Lassiter's description. He believed that Harold was merely retelling other people's stories. Nevertheless, the mystery of the treasure continues to excite the minds of romantics and gold hunters. Ruins of a Minoan structure. During the construction of a new airport in Crete, archaeologists discovered a unique circular structure about 48 meters in diameter and around 4,000 years old. The Greek Ministry of Culture called this discovery extremely interesting. The structure, covering an area of 1,800 square meters, belongs to the Minoan civilization of the Bronze Age, which existed on Crete from 3000 to 1450 BC. The Minoans were a highly developed society, known for their maritime trade and art. Experts believe that the building was mainly used in the 2000s to 1700s BC, when the first palaces were being built in Crete, such as Knossos, Phaistos, and Festos. The exact name of the structure is unknown, but the animal bones found suggest the possibility of ritual ceremonies, including sacrifices. The interior space was divided into several halls and surrounded by 8 stepped stone walls, each 1.7 meters high. The size and complex layout indicate the public significance of the building, which required significant labor and specialized knowledge. A book made of leather. In Egypt, restorers are working with one of the oldest Quranic manuscripts. It is more than 1,200 years old and weighs almost 80 kilograms. It is neither a scroll nor an ordinary book. It is a giant volume of 1,087 leaves. Each page is made from tanned animal skin. The ink has darkened, the text is barely readable, but the letters are crafted by hand with amazing precision. Every character is like a pattern. Scientists believe that this manuscript dates back to the 8th century and was probably created in one of the early Islamic centers, Kufa or Basra. The work of restorers has been going on for years. Each page is cleaned, reinforced, and fixed under a microscope. At the same time, specialists note that despite its age, the structure of the parchment is almost intact. This is one of the rare cases when an artifact has been preserved not because of the climate, but because of its size. The enormous weight and density of the pages literally sealed the text from the inside. For Muslims, this book is not just a monument of faith, but a part of the history of writing. In it, you can see the transition from ancient Arabic script to a more familiar style, as well as how religion turned text into art. A very valuable find. In August, the Canadian mining company Lucara Diamond Corporation announced the discovery of what is considered the second largest diamond in the world. It weighs 2,492 carats. The stone was found at the Karawi mine in Botswana, where another record-breaking diamond, Lesedi La Rona, weighing 1,109 carats, was previously discovered in 2015 and sold for $53 million 2 years later. The largest diamond in the world remains the famous Cullinan, weighing 3,106 carats, discovered in South Africa in 1905. To extract such impressive stones, the company used a specially developed tool, the Mega Diamond Recovery System, based on X-ray transmission. This technology is designed to search for and extract huge precious stones that remain hidden deep within the earth. What belongs elsewhere, in the wrong hands. And now, a story not about what was found, but about what lies where it shouldn't. There are things kept in the most famous museums in the world, but half the planet believes they don't belong there. A book called Jigji. This is the oldest book in the world, printed with movable type in 1377. That's 78 years earlier than the famous Gutenberg Bible. That means Koreans mastered printing almost 100 years before Europeans. UNESCO has recognized it as a monument of global significance. It is now kept in the National Library of France, where it was taken by a French diplomat back in the early 20th century. Korea is asking for its return. France refuses, explaining that the book is a treasure of all humanity, the bust of Queen Nefertiti. The limestone face is almost 3,500 years old, and this is one of the most recognizable images in history. It has been kept in Berlin since 1913. Egypt has been asking for its return home for decades, and for decades it has been refused. The Koh-i-Noor diamond, 105 carats. Since the 19th century, it has adorned the crowns of the British monarchy. It came into Britain's possession after the conquest of the Sikh Empire. India, Pakistan, Iran, and Afghanistan, 4 countries at once, want it back. Britain has no intention of returning it. And the most daring story is the gold of Troy, the so-called treasure of Priam. It was excavated in Turkey by the archaeologist Schliemann in 1873, and he secretly took it out of the Ottoman Empire. During World War II, the gold was hidden in Germany, and then it ended up in the USSR. Today, the treasures of Troy are kept in the Pushkin Museum in Moscow, and Russia considers them its own. An ancient book, an ancient face, an ancient stone, and ancient gold were excavated in one country and displayed in another, and the dispute over who really owns them has lasted longer than some countries have existed. El Toro artifacts. Under the name El Toro, hundreds of stone and bone objects are circulating online. Books made of slabs with embossed covers, masks and figurines with almond-shaped eyes, tablets with unknown writing. They are supposedly found on the hills of El Toro in Mexico, and the total number of items is sometimes said to be several thousand, sometimes up to 20,000. Some of the artifacts are indeed made skillfully, with neat carvings and repeating motifs. On the other hand, there are no published excavation reports, with coordinates, stratigraphy, associated ceramics, and laboratory dating results that would allow us to distinguish real antiquities from modern forgeries. Artifacts from El Toro are often displayed with the Ica stones from Peru. Both are large collections featuring out-of-place knowledge and have authenticity controversies. There are expedition reports from enthusiasts and even mentions of laboratory tests surrounding El Toro, but it never gets to verifiable publications in specialized journals or official museum attribution. Until there are proper reports and datings, it's just a big pile of privately owned items. They look impressive and varied, but they're unsuitable as a source for ancient history. And one more important clarification: don't confuse the Mexican El Toro with the Spanish cave Cueva del Toro. The Spanish site is classical archaeology, layer, context, datings, publications, including studies on bone double-pointed tools and Neolithic economy. That's what an evidence base looks like, and that's exactly what the Mexican El Toro lacks. An extremely rare discovery. A rare mastodon tusk was found in Florida, which became a real sensation. 29-year-old Alec Lundberg, while diving with his friend near Venice Beach, stumbled upon this unique artifact. Usually only prehistoric shark teeth and fragments of mammoth tusks are found in this area, which makes Lundberg's discovery especially valuable. Experts from the Bishop Museum of Science and Nature in Bradenton confirmed the authenticity of the tusk, describing it as extremely rare. Lundberg still has to notify the Florida Museum of Natural History to assess the scientific significance of the find. Mastodon tusks are usually only a few inches long and sell for $20 to $350. However, Lundberg's find could be worth around $5,000. It's interesting that the tusk didn't fall apart when it was lifted from the seafloor. Mastodons, which lived 5.4 million years ago and went extinct about 10,000 years ago, were relatives of modern elephants. Their fossils are usually found in Pliocene and Pleistocene deposits. It's interesting that mastodon fossils, including tusks, bones, and skulls, as well as turtles, are found only in 4 American states: Indiana, Colorado, California, and New York. Therefore, the discovery in Florida is a rare and significant find. Something at depth. And here is the last story. The strangest one. It's not about ancient times, it's about what's happening right now while you're watching this video. Over the past 10 years, more than 3,000 autonomous devices have been launched into the oceans. Small things the size of a backpack. They measure salinity and temperature. Others listen. They catch sounds and signals in the water column and decide on their own whether it's a natural noise or man-made. It works like a database. If such a signal has already been encountered, the device recognizes it. If not, it marks it as new and sends it for analysis. In June 2023, one such sensor in the Pacific Ocean caught a powerful man-made signal at a depth of about 3,600 meters. The signal lasted for about 70 minutes, and then the source started to go even deeper and disappeared. A few months later, the same thing happened in the Atlantic. There, the signal was detected by several devices at the same time. And now, here's what the whole story's about. The speed of the source was about 370 kilometers per hour underwater. At a depth of more than 3 kilometers, that's faster than most submarines go, even on the surface, and much deeper than they usually operate. To move like that in dense water at such a depth, you need enormous power and a special hull. Officially, there are no vehicles with such characteristics. Scientists started to take an interest. Maybe it's a military test? Then there would have been satellites nearby, escort ships, warnings for vessels. But there was nothing. Maybe it's nature? Then seismic stations would have detected it, but they're silent. Maybe it's an equipment glitch. But 2 Pacific devices showed the same thing, and several detected it at once in the Atlantic. The most rational explanation is a secret test of some new generation deep-sea devices, the kind people just don't talk about openly. Research in the field of ultra-high-speed underwater movement is indeed being conducted in several countries. The technology has advanced a lot, and what is shown to the public usually lags behind real developments by years. However, the officially stated depths and speeds of such devices are noticeably lower than what the sensors recorded. So this version doesn't explain everything either. But the official story was never clarified, and the question remains unanswered. The ocean is shared. It's international, and someone is racing there at 370 kilometers per hour at a depth where, according to all textbooks, there shouldn't be anything at all. And this isn't a legend or a story passed down through many people. This happened 3 years ago, and the device recorded everything down to the second. Someone goes down there where it's dark, cold, and the pressure is like 1,000 atmospheres, moves in a way that no one else on the planet can, and calmly goes even deeper. Classified tests or a rare malfunction in complex equipment? What do you think? Write in the comments. And here's what grabs your attention the most in all of this. We're used to thinking that everything about the past is already known. Textbooks are written. Museums are filled with all kinds of exhibits. All the tombs have already been opened. And then one coin, one book, one signal from the darkness of the ocean. And it turns out that we know almost nothing. Every year, the past throws at us something that shouldn't exist. And the most interesting part is where science honestly says we don't understand yet. Subscribe and turn on notifications. A new video is coming soon.